Hey, happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to the other side of addiction. I am Al Richards, and I say this every single week, and I will continue to say it every week. I'm here with my lovely co-host, Lori Warburton. Lori, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Al?
I'm doing well. You look lovely. I got to start dressing up better because every week that you come in, you outdo me
Oh,
by
well,
tenfolds.
you look great too.
Well,
So
thank you.
thank you
Thank you.
for giving me that compliment. I don't know how
Absolutely.
to take those very well. I'm learning how to, so that's just part of my
Yeah.
my thing. But
Just
thank you
another
so
thing to
much.
work on. You're
Mhm.
welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Well, hey guys, we have a very special guest today. We have Tamar Medford out of Vancouver, Canada. I am so excited to have her on today. So, I saw an interview that some people do called Waking Up with Giants. It's on Facebook, it's on every Sunday, and Tamar was one of the guests. And I happened to be watching that show that day, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we have got to have this lady on our show. So I reached out to her, told her a little bit, but let me give you a little history about Tamar. So she is a national director with Life and Balance Careers, founder of The Road Forward, and host of the Road Beyond Recovery podcast. Since overcoming a 20-year battle with drugs and alcohol, she has dedicated her life to helping entrepreneurs in recovery master in re okay, where did I lose my spot? I do this every flipping week. So anyway, let's
Well, I think she's awesome already.
yeah,
So
business and lead. um, she is basically fulfilling lives and changing lives. Tamar is a neuro change master practitioner. Now we're going to have to touch base on that because that was very difficult for me to say. She is also a performance consultant and a life coach and uses evidence based frameworks to help her clients live purpose driven lives. She is the author of 2 Amazon best selling books, which I'm not going to tell you the name of them yet, but we will get there. Tamar has also dedicated a decade of experience helping individuals in recovery, and she desires to bring more awareness to addiction, recovery, and mental health. Her mission is to help those in recovery create a life so good for themselves that they never want to go back to their old way of living. Now, I had to fight some tears back on that last line because this is the reason why we've started our podcast. Tamar, thank you so much for joining us. It's just a pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I think you both look great, by the way.
Thank
Just
you.
and I was a little when you were reading that out. I'm like, did I write that?
Yes, you did.
It still almost makes me cry.
Yeah.
Well, I had a circumstance just happen. Actually, my brother Michael, who I've talked about several times on the podcast, he got out of jail.
Wow.
And that was on the 5th. And I thought my brother was going to take him. You know, when you come out of jail, you don't have the best mental health. You know, he spent almost 7 months there and has come out, and I guess he thought he was going to have a place to stay with me, and I had to say no. But then my brother, who said he would have him for the first week, also said no. And yesterday, all this came full circle. And I've been having these conversations with him about his mental health and all these things. So I think this will be very interesting. And I just wanted to share that today because I'm a little emotional about yesterday because
I can imagine.
yeah, we had a face-to-face conversation in my home, and I had to, kind of tell him why and how come I can't do that and what I am willing to do with my healthy boundaries. So anyway, thanks for being here because I think this is the perfect timing with that, right?
Yeah.
So
So Tamar, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Now, I've heard some of your story on the other podcasts, but you were in pretty deep there for a long time, wasn't you?
I was. And, my whole journey has just shifted in so many different ways and cross addictions. Because I've been addicted to pretty much anything one can be addicted to. But, growing up, I always like to tell people I had a really good life. And because I think a lot of people associate addiction to traumatic events that happen in your childhood. And I'm here to say that, it runs in my family. It bypassed my parents, thank goodness. But, when I drank at the age of 14, I fell in love. Like my world literally turned into color. Like everything was vivid. I kept chasing that feeling. But, unfortunately with me, I would consume anything that allowed me to numb out my feelings. And, being a neurochange practitioner, actually, I've learned a lot more about brain science and really discovered that it was my inability to handle my emotions why I turned to alcohol and drugs. And, in my 20s, when everybody was going off to college and then getting married, I just wanted to hang on to the potential of this next big party and all the fun. Like, I didn't want to stop having fun because back then it was still fun. But
Yeah.
of course, it progresses with many of us. And for me in my mid 20s, I turned to harder drugs. And I found myself in places that someone like me, I would look and go, how did I end up here? Like I had a really good upbringing. I had good morals. I had good values. But that is just how deep my addiction ran. And, there was times where I would clean up for a few years, but then I'd get into codependent relationships because that was another thing. I was always seeking that love from an external source. I never learned that I had to actually find that love from within. I always needed that recognition. I did it with my dad at a young age. I'm like, just say you're proud of me. Like, tell me you're proud. But he was like, you can do better. You can do better.
Yeah.
And so drugs and alcohol for me just became that source of, okay, I'm calm now. I'm good. I don't have to deal with any of these emotions anymore.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was watching a documentary a couple weeks ago with Johnny Cash, talking about him, and he made a comment that somebody was interviewing me. He goes, "Yeah, I took pills. I took a lot of pills, and then one day I realized the pills took me."
Mm.
And it's like you don't realize how deep you're getting until that one day you wake up and all of a sudden you're like, crap, this stuff has total control over everything that I do every single day. So you mentioned that you didn't really have a lot of childhood traumas, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are the first person I think that we've had on our show that has basically said that, because a lot of our other guests have said that something, gosh, it was a handful of things that.
Well, it didn't necessarily have to come from your childhood. I think that it's just the seed of what starts that. Or if you're a true alcoholic, everybody knows that's a disease in itself. And if you have that run through your bloodlines, and you are the one that takes that first drink, whether you've had a family trauma or not as a young child, that will take a hold even then, because the process has already begun through the bloodlines. It just depends on where you take that at the time and into the future of how it grasps a hold of you, and then the next experiences, if I'm correct, upon that. So you don't always have to have, but dealing with, oh, why did you start this in the first place? It came from maybe your grandfather or down the line from that. And those are things that I've been studying and learning about too, as we've gone along with these podcasts and when I've been in recovery myself and gone through a program and all of that. So it's really important to know where that comes from.
Yeah.
So you can get a grip on it and understand it.
Because I'm sure at the age of 14, Tamar, you had no clue where that first drink was going to take you, right?
Not at
how
all.
would you?
No, and we're from Europe, which in Holland you can drink quite young. And my parents never frowned upon alcohol. I mean, when we were young, we'd be able to have a sip out of their, wine cooler or whatever. And so it was never something that was taboo. And actually, a lot of my friends who were heavy drinkers in high school, they ended up after, of course, getting responsible, going to school and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it did something else. I never felt like I fit in. We moved around a lot. And when my dad decided to chase his dream of becoming a video producer, we moved to the West Coast. And so, of course, we'd be changing schools. And every time I would have to make new friends. And I started, seeking that recognition, like, please be friends with me. And when I got to high school, I wanted to be funny. I wanted to be confident, and I wasn't. And I was always worried about what people were thinking, and a people pleaser to the extreme. And I, of course, took that into my adult life. But alcohol did for me what nothing else did, right? I was funny. I was the life of the party. I'm sure people were laughing at me. I'm pretty sure they weren't laughing with me. But all of a sudden, I just became this person that I thought others wanted me to be. And I really believe now that it was just, I wasn't able to handle my emotions. So I found a solution on how to just get rid of them.
Yeah. That almost sounds like the story of like Todd Sylvester. There's a gentleman by the name of Todd Sylvester who wrote the book I Am Recovered. He's from Utah, and he almost shared that same thing. Even in his book, he talked about started going to parties, and he was one of those guys that if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something 100%. So when he drank, he did it 100%, and he got all that attention. And it's like, man, I'm the man. I'm the partier. I'm the one everybody loves to be around at parties. And then years later, all of a sudden, he realized where that had taken him, which is in a pretty dark spot.
Yeah.
So,
That's usually where it ends up, right?
yeah. So during your podcast, I'm pretty sure it was you. You talked about dropping the shovel. Wasn't that you?
To stop digging.
Stop digging. I think
Yep.
I remember you saying just one day you finally decided to drop the shovel.
Yep, absolutely. And it took a while, because of course I was stubborn. I never thought that alcohol was my problem, and alcohol was always what started the ball rolling, right? And then it would just progressively, once I had a solution to not blacking out, I'm like, hey, this is great. I'm going to add to it. And I did the
Yeah.
pill thing too, right? I slipped a disc in my back. Ironically, I was working for a company where I did order picking, so I had to lift kegs of beer. Well, I was on a bender, so I missed 7 days of work, went back to work, slipped a disc lifting a keg of beer, which that was my favorite drink of choice at the time. And I got addicted to pain pills for 3 months because the government was now paying me. And I was like, this is great. I don't have to be at work. I'm on pain pills. I get to drink. And so I was living the life for a little until it was no fun anymore. And I think, the reason I say that I stopped digging is I feel like I've had lower bottoms in my life of addiction. I was also addicted to food. I call it Weight Watchers for Alcoholics. It's a great program, but of course I tailored it so I could drink 8 to 18 beers per day basically, and still
Wow.
lose weight. But I got married. I thought if I do what society tells me to do, I'm going to be happy. Right. So after my very codependent, abusive relationships ended, I got married to an alcoholic because why would I not? I mean, I needed someone who could drink like I could and
Yeah.
not give me, shit for not, I was like, well, he's got to drink. Right. And everything we did revolved around alcohol. We couldn't go for a road trip. We couldn't go to the movies without having something with us. And so I thought, this is great. Like, I'm married. I have a car. I've just bought a condo. Like, this is life. And I got more and more and more depressed as I went on. And I got to a point actually at the end of 2011 where, I'm sitting there on the floor holding a bottle of pills, and I'm sitting beside my dog. He was a little pug, and he kind of just gave me that look, right? And I'm like, I don't want to live anymore. Like, I'm 75,000 in debt. I'm 215 pounds. I'm severely depressed, unhappily married. Why am I here? And I really, I had actually threatened, a few times I had tried to commit suicide over my addiction. But I think this was the time where I finally had actually hit that bottom, right? My bottom. And the only reason I talk about bottoms, even in general, is because I think too many people look at themselves and compare to what other people are doing. Because I wasn't homeless, living, drinking vodka out of a brown paper bag, living under a bridge, right? So I would always be like, well, I'm not as bad as them. But in that moment, as I sat on the floor wanting to kill myself, something came over me. I definitely believe it was divine intervention at that time. And I just had this desire to live, right? I decided, okay, I'm done digging. Like, I got to get out of this huge pity pot that I had put myself in.
Wow.
I love that you said the divine intervention, because I feel like there's three things, mental, physical, and spiritual. And I think if you don't have all three of those legs functioning and working, because it seems to me like most people that I talk to and I try to help and visit with about experiences and things like that, they're having a tough time with one of those three. And normally it's the spiritual side, you know? And I mean, when you get connected in that way, you can just take off, you know, like a rocket, and you can find your purpose in life. And most people don't know what that is, or they feel at that time, you know, when you're in that dark, deep hole that you've dug for yourself, you find yourself in there going, oh my gosh, like, just like you said, why am I here? If would anyone miss me? You know, these types of things. And I also had a divine intervention that helped me, and I will never deny it, and I will never be the same because of that. And that, even though I had a gumption to just keep going on with my life, I did get that in that dark spot. And I call him God, he was there to let me know I was very much not through here yet by any means, and to keep on going. So, yeah.
Do you hear a lot of people say stuff like what you were sharing, what Lori was just sharing? I mean, while you're helping people I mean, do you hear it a lot? Is it the same thing, or?
I do, yes. And it was just something inside them ignited where they just had this glimmer of hope. And I mean, I always, I went to church when I was younger, but because my parents wanted to be alone, so they'd send us off with friends every Sunday, which was great for them. But then as I got older, of course, all this stuff had started happening to me and getting into abusive relationships. So I thought, where is God? Like if there's a God, where is he? So I just convinced myself, till the time I was 36 when I finally stopped, there was no God. But now when I look back, and I actually had because I tried to fight it in early recovery, is like, nope, I'm not doing the God thing. You cannot make me. I'm going to do it without that. And now I realize that was eventually I surrendered. But it was like to know that it's okay to let go, and you don't have to. I call myself the general manager of my universe, and it just wasn't working for me, and it was that moment of clarity that you're actually here for a reason. Like, let's start to investigate that a little bit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you just hit on it. All of us have a talent that we were given, and we all have a reason to be through here. And Lori and I, we've shared on our show quite a few times that all the stuff both of us have gone through, even though we've gone through different things, but the heartache, the pain, the trying to commit suicide, or the thought of wanting to commit suicide, everything that's happened and where we're at today, we needed to travel that road to put us right exactly where we're supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that. And I also feel like from the beginning that God gave us the talents we needed. Even though he knew we were suffering or going to go through hardship, we still had those talents and that ability to help us through those times.
Yeah.
We had to find our own, like you say, your own road where you're just done, and whatever experience that takes to get there. But we're all given our talents, I believe, at an early age. And then they kind of grow and change as you go along, because you don't realize how significant those are. And you might think it's one thing, and then it turns into something else. Is that hitting home with you? Is that?
It took me a long time to realize it, because I think probably up until about 5 or 6 years into my recovery, I was like, is this it? Like I felt the desire to do more, but I had no idea what it looked like. And I had to start on that seeking journey, right? Because I would be like, who's going to take me serious? I'm an alcoholic. Like, or somebody said, you have a doctor's in alcoholism. Like, let's take a look here back at your 22-year history. You have more experience in life than a lot of people do. You can actually help these people who are going through the same thing and hopefully stop sooner. And I wouldn't take anything back. I wouldn't change anything. I mean, would I have liked to get sober a little younger? Yes, because I see people now today, it's like 1920. I'm like, oh, hold on to this because you have so much potential. And we build all the skills in our addiction that we need to create the life we want.
And I like that you said that, Tamar, because I've gone to a lot of AA meetings with my wife. And I know I've shared this before because it still blows me away. But this guy got up, he got his 10 or 15-year chip. I can't remember what it was. And he got up there and he goes, I thank God every single day that he made me an alcoholic. And I remember leaning over to my wife and going, this guy's freaking nuts. Why the hell wouldn't you thank God for making you an alcoholic? But then as he started sharing his story, the guy was homeless. I mean, he lived in his car for a while, finally lost his car, living on the streets. And he just started sharing all this stuff. And then he shared, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it. Then he started sharing where he's at in his life right now. And on the way home, I told my wife, I'm like, when I lost my job at 24 years, I wanted to do some soul searching. I wanted to find out who I was as a person, and I wanted to become a better person. I'm reading all these self-help books, and I'm going to these classes and these seminars, and I'm still working on it. And then just one day, like what you said, Tamar, you just dropped the shovel. One day that guy's light bulb went off and he got it. It just came to him. And it's like, I'm working my butt off to get there. Now, I'm not saying he didn't, because he went down a bad road to figure it out, but that light bulb went off. And now he's talking about how phenomenal his life is and where he's at. And the reason why he thanked God for becoming an alcoholic is because he would not have or be where he's at today if it wasn't for that. And unfortunately, there are many who don't have that opportunity. They end up losing their life, which is sad. But
well, I always say, our weaknesses, all of them become our strengths as we go along. And it's weird, because who would have thought, that recovery would bring us together, and strengthen us as well. Because with each story I hear, I learn something and I take it home. And it's funny how my communication skills with my family or other people who are struggling in addiction right now and things like that, little tidbits and things that I've learned from what I've already known, these shows have helped me to do that. So it's great to have other perspectives, on here as well, because it's just everybody's on a different journey. And I call it miracles in progress, because that's what we all are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
tell us a little bit more about this neurochange practitioner, right? Did I say it right?
You did, practitioner. It's actually very exciting, and it's just, to comment on what you just said. Emotional intelligence is huge. And I really believe that I don't know about you, but my first year of recovery, I cried probably more than I had in my entire life. I'm like, what is this like liquid streaming from my eyes here?
I called that process shedding a skin, like you shed different skins of yourself. Yeah. Right. And I did the same thing. So keep going.
All the time. And I was like, I talked to my sponsor. I'm like, what is going on? Like, I got to be getting dehydrated. She's like, drink lots of water. You're going to need lots of water. And, but anyway, I'm learning about emotional intelligence. And I really think that recovery was that first time for me to develop emotional intelligence, to actually acknowledge what I'm feeling. And I think that's also the power in recovery and sharing our stories, because we grew up with all these beliefs, right? And this is part of the program actually that we talk about. It's neuroscience. It's basically bringing the neuroscience of change into an easy, digestible format for the masses, right? Teenagers included is who we want to hit with our coaching program. And so, you have these beliefs that develop over time, and there's a couple different ways that you can change those beliefs. And one is cognitive dissonance, which is, I was so happy when I could say that word, and neuroplasticity, by the way. I just have to shout that out.
I was repeating it in my head, and I just stopped.
You got to take the small wins, right? Now I try to always get neuroplasticity.
Yeah,
But,
there you go.
Cognitive dissonance is where you challenge that belief and find evidence that opposes the belief. So a lot of us will say, oh, we can't do that, or nobody's going to take us seriously. Well, has anybody ever told you that? And it's like, well, no, right? That's putting yourself. And then the second one is emotional awareness, being more aware of your emotions and getting emotional discomfort. And you get that by listening to other people's stories and gaining the belief that they can do it, so can I. And I had no idea, but as I'm going through this program myself, I've implemented a lot of the strategies and see how closely related recovery is and this program. And it's all on brain science, but it kind of goes to show you that, when people share their stories so openly like that, then we start to gain that hope. And that's actually why when I wrote my first book, I called it Hope Elevated, because there is a power in that. And so I was already a life coach and a performance consultant, but I thought, what is something that I can help entrepreneurs in recovery specifically overcome the limiting beliefs, overcome imposter syndrome, because I've created this life for myself that I still can't believe it. Like when you were reading my bio, it feels like you're talking about somebody completely different still to this day. And I want to help people create that life so they don't want to relapse. And I thought, if I can teach a scientific evidence-based program with the tools that I now share, I can actually help make lasting change. And that's the biggest thing for me, is how do we help people change their brains? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to agree with you 100% on that. And the reason why is when my wife was going through rehab after rehab after rehab, in and out of jail, I remember her attorney called me once, and she was in jail again. And he called me up and he's like, what do we need to do? Because she is getting close to where they're going to send her to prison because she's not getting it, and it doesn't matter what program they put her in. And I'm like, look, the rehabs, she's been through plenty of rehabs. She knows how to get through them. The problem is, and she knows the AA steps, the 12 steps. I mean, she knows this stuff by like the back of her hand. I told him, somehow, some way, we got to find somebody that can get inside her brain and figure out, and you just said it, the limiting beliefs, because that gal never felt like she was worth anything from a very young age all the way up, and she's in her 40s. And for a long time, she felt like she was worthless, and that's what kept driving her back to the alcohol. And when I told him, we've got to figure out somehow, some way, a program that she can go to where somebody can get inside her head, because I've tried it, and me being on the other side of addiction, I am the wrong person to be trying to do that, because I don't get it. I think I do, but we don't. So for those who are listening that are on the other side of the addiction, stop, because we don't understand it. And I've understood a little bit more, but to understand it fully, we'll never get it, because we're not in those shoes. Mm-hmm. So I like that you touched that on the limiting beliefs, because now my wife, I see her changing slowly but surely. And it's because she's changing her limiting beliefs. We were at a store a couple days ago, and we were standing in a line waiting, and she just turned around and started talking to the person. I'm like, holy crap, I've been with you 15 years and I've never seen you turn around and talk to somebody standing in line. Who is this woman? Yeah, and
she's gaining confidence.
She's gaining confidence. And I even mentioned that to her on the way out to the vehicle. I'm like, you just shocked the hell out of me. And she's like, what did I do? And I'm like, I've never seen you turn around and start talking to somebody standing in line with us. I'm like, I was just like in shock. And she goes, I don't know. They just look like somebody nice to talk to. And I'm like, my gosh, this stuff's starting to work. She's starting to understand. So yeah,
that's neat. I'm happy to hear that.
that was really cool. Even when we were at the rodeo, she did that. She turned around and started talking to people at the rodeo. And I'm like, man, I've got a new wife.
That's That's awesome.
I'm the social butterfly. I'm the one that doesn't shut up. Now here she is talking. Awesome. So, Tamar, with everything that I read, you are doing so much. I mean, once you looked at your dog laying on the floor and you got that aha moment, did you know right then and there this is the direction you wanted to go?
No, I would say it took me probably about 6 or 7 years, but I was determined to change my life. I remember actually, so I didn't go into recovery right away. I actually decided, okay, well, I'm overweight, so I need to lose some weight, then I'm going to feel good, right? And so I went and hired a personal trainer, and we found out that we were in gymnastics together in high school. We were terrible. Like, I still can't do
Oh,
a
wow.
cartwheel. Just, not flexible whatsoever. So I don't know what I was thinking. But so we had that in common, and we laughed, and we started on this journey. And I just remember she's like, "What is your goal?" And I said, "I want to go to Las Vegas, and I want to get a bikini, feel comfortable in my own skin, and sit by a pool party." And she's like, "Okay." Little did I know she was in the program. So when you hire a trainer and you're an alcoholic, that is not the trainer you want to hire to achieve that specific goal. But, as I went, I would, brag about having 9 beers every weekend. I'd be like, I only had 3 beers Friday, Saturday, Sunday. She's like, good for you. Thinking, wow, people who don't have a problem don't have to brag that they had 9 beers on the weekend.
Yeah.
But I was also drinking a bottle of NyQuil to follow that up with, which apparently there's alcohol in that. And so eventually through our journey, she had said, hey, the meetings that I go to once in a while, if you're ever interested, come with me. I'm like, I don't need that. And then, of course, I had my one really bad last bender. But after I had built my foundation in early recovery, like I said before, I hit that moment when I was like, I know I'm here for something more. Like, I want to help people. I love seeing the light go on in people's eyes as I work with people to get sober. Like, there's no better feeling. And now I really understood what, people were telling me. They're like, hey, when you come to me, it helps me more than it helps you. I'm like, are you crazy? Like that is totally ass backwards. But when I started helping people, it helped my recovery. And I started getting this desire to do coaching. So I would say probably after having a pretty good 3 to 4 year stint of being complacent, relapse is not part of my story. And yet I always say that because I know that if I stop doing the work that I could easily go back. But really it was 2019 when I decided to stop digging again, right? I was struggling with the weight loss again. I wasn't feeling motivated. And I'm like, okay, enough's enough. And that's actually when I started hanging out with other entrepreneurs, right? I started listening to podcasts. Like, I hadn't even heard of a podcast before 2019. And I actually started a podcast in December of 2019. And that's when my journey started to completely change. That's when I realized, okay, maybe I am here for something more.
I love it.
Awesome.
Let's stop there. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, let's talk a little bit more about your podcast. But this is some good stuff, right? I mean, this has been great. I think this is one of the first times we've laughed this much at the first part of the show. Because we shed a lot of tears on this show as well, but there's been some really good laughs on this. Again, Tamar, thank you for being here. Hey, everybody, stay tuned. We'll be back right after this short break. Thank you.
How do you start your morning? Start it with a cup of High Point coffee. Because no matter where you go or what you do, it's always better with coffee. High Point Coffee. What's your high point? Located on the corner of 7800 South and Redwood Road in West Jordan. And a special thanks goes out to our partners in Oxford, Mississippi.
This is Gregory, owner of Lift Up Concrete, proudly serving the Wasatch Front for the last 12 years, lifting sunken flatwork for both residential and commercial applications. Only fully trained professionals lifting concrete at your residence with the same quality of material and method used at every commercial job we ever do. Don't replace it, lift it. liftupconcrete.net, 801-792-4535. Contact us at liftupconcrete.net, or if you're looking for a complimentary quote, 801-792-4535. Again, 801-792-4535. Again, this is Gregory, Lift Up Concrete Lifting.
Hello, my friends. This is Brad Neufeld, and I want to thank you for tuning in to the Resilience Talk Network. You can listen to my show, Resilience, every morning, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. On my show, we will be discussing what it takes for you to overcome the day-to-day challenges that all of us face in life, as well as some of the devastating ones that may lead us to feelings of hopelessness and despair. It's my goal to provide you with the tools and skills that you need to overcome anything that is thrown your way. To find out more about my show, visit our website at www.resiliencetalk.com. That's www.resiliencetalk.com. And as always, until we meet again, go for everything that you want in life and make it happen.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the other side of addiction. Our guest, Tamar from Vancouver, Canada. This is awesome. I love technology. We are interviewing somebody from Canada, and I've got to get there one day because they have the salmon and the eagle run, I think, from what I heard in March. I read that in a book, and I wrote that in one of the 300 things that I've got to do in life.
Neat.
Yeah, I've got to go see that. So before break, we were talking about your podcast. So share a little bit more about your podcast, Tamar.
Absolutely. So it actually started the road to health because I always start things a little bit backwards. But at the time in my corporate job, I was traveling and I had just met who is now my podcast mentor. He was my health mentor at the time because he's actually, when I started looking for podcasts to get motivated because I'd had suffered from the weight gain again, I found his podcast. I was like, oh, this guy's great. Joined all his stuff, followed him, went to his event down in Huntington Beach, California, because it's only a 2-hour flight for me, met all these amazing podcasters. And they were like, Tamar, you're not drinking. How come? And I said, oh, I'm a retired professional. That's what I usually say.
I've never heard anybody say that.
And it always makes them laugh, and they never really dig into it. But of course, one of them, all of them being in the health and wellness industry, one of them was like, why don't you drink? Like, can you dig deeper into that? And she's like, you have a story, you have a voice. You need to share that story with the world. You could change people. And I'm like, who, me? Like, I'm from, Vancouver, Canada. But anyway, so I left that event totally exhilarated and like, maybe I can do this, right? Like, they gave me the belief. And so my podcast coach was like, why don't you share your journey of traveling because of course food, I love food. Like I can eat food all the time and it's something I still work on, and share the tips and strategies that we're working on together in this show. Well, then of course COVID hit. And it was right when I was decided to write my first book, and I shifted more into the recovery space. And so because I couldn't travel anymore, I was still sharing my weight loss journey with my viewers. But then I started reading chapters or talking about chapters in my book. And that's when, I was told, listen, you've got this gift of connecting with people and helping them discover their purpose with your coaching, because I started my coaching business right after COVID started too. Why don't you shift over to a new show on recovery? And that's where I came up with The Road Beyond Recovery, because for me, I truly believe that when I took the time to discover my purpose, and it's one of the things I'm incredibly passionate about teaching people now, is once you find that clear direction and all your decisions start to align with that direction and that vision that you have for yourself, it's easier to make decisions, right? And so
Yeah.
that's where the road beyond recovery came from, because I wanted people to experience the life I was, and I wanted them to realize that there's not just recovery. There's recovery, and then there's beyond recovery. Because I don't know about you guys, but I got sober so I could actually learn to live a better life, and I don't want to go back to the old life.
Yeah, it's that light. Lori talks about this all the time too. It's that light at the end of the tunnel, because there really is the light. And from what I'm learning from people like yourselves and a lot of our guests, that light, when you reach it, it is a hell of a lot brighter than it's ever been.
Yeah, I get all kinds of comments about that as well. People can just see the change and the growth, so it's kind of neat to experience that, where you're wondering, but you don't need to wonder when people reach out and talk to you about all, and the way you're feeling as well. And there's so many different things. I think when COVID came, and the past really 3 years have been extremely difficult for so many, and I always like to say they suffer in the silence, because there's always that embarrassment, and people, wow, if anybody knew, they would be embarrassed, but then that's why we do, right, this kind of thing, so we can help reach down and lift people up from where they're at. So
that's exactly why we do what we do. And it sounds like Tamar's doing the same thing, because
absolutely,
I had the same experience when I was sitting down at a coffee shop talking to a friend when I first started sharing the story about my wife's alcoholism. And he said the same thing. He goes, "You need to share this." And I'm like, who the hell wants to hear my story? He goes, who the hell wouldn't? Because he says, "Al, there's people going through the exact same thing that you're going through." And I went, man, I never thought of that. And then God has been placing people like Lori and Brad and other people. He's just been it's like he's just dropping them right down in front of me. And I'm still in shock, even the response we've been getting from our podcast, some of the messages we've been getting. It's just, I'm shocked. And we have guests, because Lori and I, when we first started this, we were going, okay, well, you and I, we'll talk about our stuff, and then we'll have a guest.
We were going to be,
right?
But we were going to publicly speak before COVID came.
Yeah.
That's what we were trying to do, is he was going to be man in white boots or something then.
Yeah.
And I don't remember.
My white cowboy boots.
We were trying to figure out this, but this is literally where we came from since then. Right. And that's the reason I'm bringing that up, for no other reason, just to see how far you come. You even look back a little bit to where we were at that point, and writing things down and how we were going to get there and who we were going to have. And then COVID came.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh dear, now we have to completely redirect. And then we had a few great meetings and came up with some ideas. So,
and everything just kind of, and
flew together.
And I think all of us are the same. This podcast, I know how Lori feels a little bit. She hasn't shared a lot, and I'm sure she feels the same way. But this podcast, to me, this is like my everything. I do other things on the side, but I'm constantly, my wife's even like, "What's going on in that head of yours?" And it's like, "Oh, nothing." And she's like, "Oh, don't tell me nothing. I know that look." And it's like, I'm constantly thinking of things that, how can we spread this more? We've got to get it out there, because all of us have been ashamed. All of us have been embarrassed. And I think pretty much everybody we've had on the show, besides the professionals who, not saying you're not a professional, Tamar, but I'm just saying the people who haven't had the addictions that help people, but we've all been embarrassed, and this has to be known. People have to know that there's people like Tamar, like Lori, the lady in red, even I guess like myself, that are there to help them, to help them find those steps, because their life is better. Life is better on this other side. And as much as my wife didn't even want to admit it, she's like, now I'm actually seeing it. So podcasts like yours, and hopefully like ours as well, is going to reach so many people and help so many people. Because you said it even Tamar earlier, it made your journey all worth it. I mean, yeah. So oops, gosh, I keep hitting something that keeps my sound off. But hey, during our break, we were talking about humility.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great subject. Lori brought it up. I want to talk more about it, or listen to you ladies talk more about it, because the word humility, I thought it was something totally different years ago. And now I understand more about what humility is. And if it wasn't for me going to like AA meetings and different things like that, because that word's brought up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you have to share about humility, Tamar?
Well, I almost, believe it or not, did not start my podcast because I really thought if I put myself out there, I'd always had this like, well, I can't put myself out there. I don't want to get famous, right? The ego starts to creep back, and that has not happened. I mean, it's totally different, but I almost stopped myself. And my counselor, who's also in recovery, she's like, why don't you want to start your podcast? And I said, well, what about humility, right? Like, I want to be humble. I should just sit back and just let things happen. She's like, no, no, no. And I remember in early recovery, because, it was bad. I was way more arrogant than I thought I was. And I was on that pink cloud, right? The first little bit, I'm like, this is awesome. My marriage is over. I'm single. This is good. And so my sponsor at the time, we actually lived together because she took me in after my marriage had collapsed and I went bankrupt. And, I was just having a good old time. And I get a text and it says, Tamar, yeah, she's in the room over on the other side of the house, but I get a text at like 9 p.m. And she's like, Tamar, what does humility mean to you? And what does it mean to you in your sobriety? And I looked at the text and I was like, I had to reread it. I'm like, what a bag. Like, what is she talking about? I'm like the most humble person I know. And apparently you don't have to say that if you are actually humble. And it was funny because that Sunday, I got really offended. In the beginning, I was always like, why would you say that to me? Like, I was still the general manager of my universe. And I went to church because I was still looking for my higher power, my God. And we walked into the church service and there it was, humility right across the front of the stage. And things like that continue to happen. But from that time, I would like to say that I've really worked on my humility. And that's just giving without expecting anything in return anymore for me.
Exactly. I think it's like, when you do things for people, you don't need recognition for that at all whatsoever. I think that's humility in itself. And also, because people like gratification. Oh, they look at them, they did this, they're so wonderful. But it's just not expecting anything. You're just giving. And then I think another part of humility also is going without. Like, for instance, so I lived with my son and his wife and family for about 6 months. Then that was early in my sobriety. Then I went to work and lived in this beautiful house and everything that my work provided for me at a very low cost, but I decided at that point in time, it wasn't a glamorous job. So the place to live was better than what I was doing, because it was actually for a storage facility at the time when I first started. But I remember saying to myself, I want to go without. So I had a big screen TV and everything, but I did not, even though I had the ability to turn it on, I went without internet. I did that for quite a long time. It was almost 2 years. And then when I decided, hey, you know what, it's time to turn this on and do that, I almost got anxiety from that, but I think going without, noticing people need more than yourself, or just giving what you do have, but not overextending yourself, because that's where you get into trouble as well. So if you're just giving, and then you're digging a hole for yourself, that's almost like you're trying for something else, you know, like you said, being a people pleaser, just whatever, trying to get recognition. It's you take care of yourself first. There's nothing wrong with that. And then you give, if you have left over, what you have to your family or others that you see suffering or things, and not expect anything, just like you said. So, yeah. I'm still working on the humility part because I don't like to just come clomp, clomp, clomp through the door and here I am, you know, like I used to tease about that, da 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 da, and I'd come in, you know, I don't do that anymore. You know, I've learned not to do that. So, yeah.
It is hard not to, when you start getting recognition and noticed, it is very difficult to pull the reins back. Because I can see, I mean, we had a guest, Breanne Davis, who is out of LA, movie star, and she talked about that a little bit, how you start getting all that attention and everybody wants to give you things, and how quickly you can get sucked in that vacuum pipe, and it's very quick, and it's a hard thing to do. I mean, really, to have humility and be able to keep it where you need to keep it, I think it's a fight every single day.
Well, like she said, you know, it kind of held her back from her podcast, you know, and I feel like that's the same way with myself and my singing and what I want to do with that. And so I've held myself back from that. And then I held myself back from buying the car I have right now and just different things, because I thought, wait a minute, maybe that wasn't the smartest move, you know, and you feel it in here. It's something you feel inside.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that, I mean, it's also an emotion and a feeling and a different sort of caring type feeling, you know?
Yeah.
So I have things I'm personally working on myself. So I'm glad that you brought that up. That's great. So
I need to get on it, because I'm not really a jealous person, but I'm just using this word. But I'm jealous Tamar has 2 books, because I want to write one. I want to write one so bad, and I've started, but I've stopped because it's like, no, this isn't the way I want to go. It's basically, I want to share the journey and the story I went through with my wife's addiction, so somebody on the other side as well might be able to hopefully buy that book one day and go, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I went through. And because my wife and I, we were talking about it yesterday, and I said, I made so many mistakes in the 7 years, especially the last 4 years when her drinking got really bad. I made so many mistakes trying to help her. And you 2 ladies just touched on it. You have to help yourself first. You know, I mean, you hear it.
That's the hard part.
When you get on a plane, right? You know, in case there's loss of cabin pressure, put the mask on yourself first and then help others. And I wasn't even helping myself. So how the heck was I supposed to help my wife? You know, and a lot of her addiction had to come from her to battle that with inside her. But there was other ways that I could have done things differently.
Yeah.
So
I think all of this just helps. Like I said, with my recent experience with my brother just yesterday, all of this being able to tell him my real feelings instead of like sugarcoating it or hiding it. I said, I want you to understand that I could get sick if I don't tell you how I truly feel. And even though some of the words might hurt, or, you know, me having to say no to certain things, to have healthy boundaries, you know, it's important to take care of you inside, you know, and that made the most sense to him once I touched base on that. He was more willing to understand that, because I'm sure he goes through it himself.
yeah.
But, you know, it's easy to make up something or a reason why you can't have them or this or that. And I'm like, simply, I just told him how I felt. But then this morning I send him a text. We're already each evening, you know, with Mallory's story.
Mm-hmm.
He's calling me every evening at 6:00 p.m. And what I do is touch base with him in the morning and just say, good morning, I love you, I hope you have a successful day, starting off that way. And then he's going to connect with me in the evenings each day. So I said, over time and trust built, we'll see where our relationship goes from there.
So Tamar, did you have to set up a lot of boundaries for yourself? And did you have to, and I know we've talked about it, there's certain people, once you set boundaries, like you just did, there's also certain people that you kind of have to, it's not that you don't like them anymore, but you just kind of have to shove out of your circle. I mean, I'm sure you went through that as well, right?
Oh, several times. The first time, obviously, is when I went into recovery. I tried so desperately to hang on to the people I thought were my friends. And I remember probably in month 3, I went out to, friends of mine were having a barbecue, and we don't really even talk today, but, I thought these were good friends. So, of course, here's me, my 6-pack of Diet Coke, heading over there, and I would match them drink for drink. And of course, to drink 6 Diet Cokes in an hour is not very smart.
Ooh.
Highly don't recommend it. I touch the stove twice to make sure it's hot. I'm not a one kind of toucher person. And so I finally realized, okay, I would come home with these emotional hangovers and I'd be like, what's wrong? Like, I only drank Diet Coke last night. And my friend would be like, well, how many did you drink? I'm like, 6. And she's like, you were there for 2 hours. Like, you seriously? I'm like, and I drank that in the first hour. And so that was the first shift I had to make. And then, like Lori was saying about the setting boundaries, saying no for me was always so hard. And I thank God that I had people in my life and in my recovery that were not afraid to hurt my feelings, because I always overscheduled. I always was like, yes, I'll do this. And then towards the end of the week, because I was still working, I would have to cancel. And I had a good friend of mine in recovery that just said, you know what, I got to back off from our friendship. Like, you've canceled too many times now. And I was devastated because I'm like, like, you're one of my favorite people. How could you, not want to hang out anymore? And that taught me a valuable lesson. And as I started on my own personal development journey, I actually learned that no is a very powerful word. And I'm not afraid to say it anymore. And I think it's, it's big. And since I've discovered my purpose in life, whenever I'm faced with a decision, I say, okay, does that align with my purpose, with the vision I have for myself? And if it doesn't, I say no. Like, I stopped playing softball when COVID hit, but I'm like, this doesn't align with what I want to do anymore, right? I want to do my podcast. I want to be a writer, and putting yourself first. And this is what I teach people, because I always hear, well, I don't have time for this. And it's like, well, what are you doing? Well, I have to cook my husband or wife dinner. I have to take care of the kids. I have to do this. And it's like, but what are you doing for you? And when people finally learn to set those boundaries and start to discover what makes them tick, what makes them want to get out of bed in the morning, like I had, because I would get up at 3:30 a.m. when I was working both my job and my side hustle. You show up differently in the lives of others. Like, people notice. You might not see them as much, but when you do see them, it's like, oh, something's going on with this person. Like, they're actually really enjoying life, and you just show up better. So it is important to set those boundaries and do what you love.
Yeah. And oh, did you have something?
Well, I remember one day, my boss said to me, my general manager, he said, can I ask you a question? And I said, yes. And he said, do you ever think of yourself? Do you ever think of yourself? And I was like, why did he just ask me that? I mean, I just brought in this big plate of food for everybody and all this other stuff, which I'm constantly doing. Or if someone's having a bad day, I'll go and I can see it in their eyes. So I'll run and I'll get them a beautiful little thing and I'll set it on their desk, and all the ladies are mad and I'll go do this or that. He said, do you ever think of yourself? And I was like, I don't think so. Maybe not. You know what I mean? So my humility really has always been there, but it was more like I just didn't want anybody to hurt. Mm-hmm. I wanted to bring happiness to whoever is suffering. And that's when I was in my state, of alcoholism and all of that. So people pleasing, I think, goes along with that sometimes, because you're trying to live your lives for other people or that kind of thing. But Anyway,
And
just a side note.
I think Tamar hit on it too, because what she just shared. So I was a big softball fanatic. I loved playing ball. I mean, I used to play like 4 nights a week, played on traveling league back when I was in Kentucky. And I've played so hard. I've totally destroyed both my shoulders, and I had to give it up. When I lost my job and I started trying to figure out who I was, and I started giving back to the community a lot. I started getting involved with so many different committees, and I've done it for years. And last year, COVID changed my way of thinking a little bit. Now, I've not made all that great of a living the last 12 years, and I've made it, but I was doing so much with these committees that I was on, and they were great committees. And I finally had to pull myself back and go, you know what? I've got to get my feet underneath me. Once I do, I will do better at these committees than what I'm doing right now. Yes, I'm still doing things and I'm still helping and participating, but I'm not at the level where I really want to be, because I'm not making it. Mm-hmm. And thank goodness when I called you on the phone and I'm like, hey, if you're still wanting to do this, we're pulling the trigger, and I don't give a crap how we're going to do it, but we're going to make it happen. That I finally had to set my boundaries on that part too, and just say, hey, this is where I'm going. This is what I want to do. This is my passion. There's other things that I have. And you touched base where a lot of people say, well, they don't have the time because they got to cook dinner, or they got to take kids to soccer, or whatever it may be. What I found for me, I think, which 2020 helped me a lot, because I did a lot of thinking, which millions of other people did the same thing. I had to realize why I didn't start this, or why we didn't start this as soon. And it was not basically that I didn't want to, because I did. And it's not that I didn't have time, because you can always find time. If you want to do something bad enough, by golly, you will find the frickin' time.
Was it fear of failure?
The fear. That's what I'm getting to. It's that fear, mm-hmm. because you're so afraid. Now, if I was saying to Tamar, I want to start a podcast, she would do everything in her power to convince me I could do this. For me to convince myself, that's a whole different story, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, and it goes back to the limiting beliefs, right? It's something that I teach on, is when we have it in our head that we can't do something, that's strong. And it's really hard to adjust from that fixed way of thinking into the growth mindset, and realize that, hey, every mistake is an opportunity to learn. It's not a failure, right? There's no such thing as failure.
No, nope. And you hit it. I think I shared something on my Facebook page a week or two ago, or maybe I have it and I haven't shared it yet, but it says what you just shared. There is no failure. You know, there isn't. It's just, who was it that did the light bulb? I always say it's not Benjamin Franklin. Oh. Thomas Edison. So, you know, you would think I would know this. Yeah. Tesla. No, but anyway, you know, people said, well, you failed 10,000 times when you were inventing the incandescent light bulb. He says, I didn't fail 10,000 times. It was 10,000 times I found that it didn't work. You know, it just got him closer each time. And that's what all of us are doing in our lives. Every time something bad happens, God even says it puts you closer to something good that's gonna happen. Yeah. So
absolutely.
Yeah, loving our conversation so far. We are going to take another quick little break, and then we're going to come back. Tamar, we want people to know who you are, how they can get in contact with you, and we would like you to share a little bit more about your books, if that's okay, which I'm sure it is.
Sounds great.
Awesome. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick little break. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Tamara K. Anderson, and I want to share something special with you. When our son Nathan was diagnosed with autism, I felt like the life we had expected for him was ripped away, and with it, my own heart shattered as well. It's very common for families to feel anger, pain, confusion, and anxiety when a child is diagnosed. This is where my book, Normal for Me, comes into play. It shares my story of learning to replace my pain with acceptance, peace, joy, and hope. Normal for Me has helped change many lives, and I'd like to give this book to as many families as possible. We've put together something I think is really special. My friends and listeners can order copies of my book at a significantly discounted price, and we will send them to families who have just had a child diagnosed with autism or another special needs diagnosis. We will put your name inside the cover so they will know someone out there loves them and wants to help. I will also sign each copy. You can order as little as one or as many as hundreds to be shared with others. So go to my website, tamarkanderson.com, and visit the store section for more information and to place your order. You can bless the lives of many families by sending them hope, love, and peace. Check it out today at tamarkanderson.com and help me spread hope to the world.
Welcome to the Resilience Talk Network. My name is Jay Walter, and I'm the host of Rebuilding, heard every weekday night from 6 to 7 p.m. You can listen in and learn how to face your fears, overcome obstacles, and make dreams a reality. So listen every weekday night from 6 to 7 p.m. right here on the Resilience Talk Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the other side of addiction. We have our special guest, Tamar, from Canada, Vancouver, Canada. And before I get started, I forgot to mention our sponsors. I get so wrapped up with our guests and stuff. Yeah, I was just so into what we were going to talk about. So I would like to take this time to thank our sponsors, who we are so grateful for. We have High Point Coffee in West Jordan, right off the corner of 7800 South and Redwood Road. It's almost like a Cheers where everybody knows your name. At least the girls there do, and they'll know exactly what you want. These guys are phenomenal. So highly recommend going and getting a cup of coffee or a latte or whatever you desire, going to High Point Coffee. Also want to thank our sponsor, Lift Up Concrete out of Kaysville. Lori always likes to say,
it gives your concrete a facelift.
So anyway, these guys are awesome. And lifting concrete, if you have settled or sunken concrete, it's a third to a fifth the cost of tear out and replace. And I tell you what, Gregory and his guys, I've been doing business with Gregory for the past seven years. This guy is phenomenal. His guys are phenomenal. They do work right. We also want to thank Surf Pro, and we're talking Surf Pro from Ogden all the way to St. George. These guys are awesome. So if you have something happen in your house, like a flooded basement, or I don't know, if you're not going to call them if you're the one that did the crime scene, but these guys do crime scenes, or maybe you will. I don't know. But give Surf Pro a call. These guys are great. They've done a lot of work, and I mean, they've been all over the United States helping in disaster areas. And we also had a new sponsor come in last week, I Am Real Estate. Troy and his people, these guys are phenomenal. And we cannot leave without saying thank you to Brad and Resilience Talk Network. None of this would be possible without our sponsors, without Resilience Talk Network, and without our special guests. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
We are so blessed and so honored to have Tamar with us today. And yeah, do you got anything you want to add in there before we have Tamar?
I don't. I think you're doing a fabulous job.
Gee, thank you. Yeah, and I haven't really cried yet.
What I would like to mention is Brad Neufeld. He is absolutely amazing. I come here every Thursday to get my hug, and he's just so awesome. He has so many talents, and if you want to talk about a humble guy, that's him. I've seen it over and over. So
yeah. And I get my hug on Thursdays from Brad too. So
we all love that.
Yeah, we have some male bonding going on here in the studio. All right. Thank you for sharing that, Lori. I'm grateful for that. All right, Tamar, Tell us about your books. I mean, yeah, you've got the Road Beyond Recovery. That's your podcast. You've got Hope Elevated is one of your books. Now, was that your first book or second book?
That was the first book.
That was the first one. And what was the name of your other one?
Beyond Recovery.
Awesome. And what sparked you to write these books? Was it because of your journey, or just one day did you just wake up and that light bulb went off and you're like, I'm writing a book?
Well, I think after I started podcasting, I got this bug to start to share my story. And I realized that people actually responded more to that part of my journey when I actually got real and vulnerable. And I was always scared because, like it or not, there's a stigma around addiction. And I was always very fearful that if I say, oh, I'm, recovering alcoholic, that people would look at me and go, ooh, watch her, right? Like she could quickly go back. But what I didn't realize is that if I actually shared my story, the people who are still struggling that are just like me, maybe that would inspire them to change. And so, my mentors had actually encouraged me, why don't you write your story? But I thought I almost failed English 12. My English teacher walked by my desk, slapped my exam down on my desk and said, if you fail this exam and you're in my class next year, I will make your life a living hell. And
wow.
I think I passed by 2%. So, because I had to come close, right? But
Yeah.
I honestly developed this limiting belief that, well, I'm not a writer, right? And so I started doing the research because I was already into that personal development. And I thought, why not share my story? And so I think I wrote the first book in about 6 weeks time.
Holy
and
cow.
I had it. Yeah, I'm that all in. Everything that I do still today, if you want it done, I'll get it done. But I'm going to go all in and I'm going to burn myself out most likely doing it, which is actually what I talk about in my second book. But I just shared my story. And, I thought if I can put it out there and if somebody is just, a little bit, below where I was and they read that and they can relate to my story more than they can the person who was homeless or whatnot, I've done my job. And that's something that I really had to get out of my head was this comparison of, well, they're lower, so their story's better, because it is nothing about that. And so that's why I wrote the first book. And it's very therapeutic. Thank goodness my counselor is in recovery as well, because we relived the whole thing together. But after that, of course, I had friends that have been following me on my journey say, okay, what's next? We want more. And I'm like, well, I just wrote a book. And they're like, we know you have another win and you didn't really touch on your recovery all that much. And that's when I went into my book too, because I thought, what if I could share some of the strategies that I've used since becoming an entrepreneur, and also in my recovery, building that foundation that would help people start to discover their purpose. Because I talk about that in the book, right? Is how do you build that foundation? This is how I did it. These are the strategies and tools that I use. And now, how do you discover your purpose so you can start to walk that path that you were meant to walk? And I wanted to give people hope that there's more outside of recovery. Like recovery is always going to be there for me. It's always my foundation. I have to remember that. But I wanted a book that would share my journey in early entrepreneurship, essentially, right? Because it still seems very surreal. I just quit my corporate job, right? That was my dream, to do that within a year. So I wrote the 2 books, quit my corporate job, and now I just want to share.
Wow. That
That's
is really
awesome.
cool.
That's amazing.
I should have you write my book.
Oh,
If you wrote it in that quick. Dang.
I always thought of telling my story through songs. You know what I mean?
That's a good way of doing it.
My mom and grandma wanted me to write a book, but I also feel like there's more and I can't figure out what that is. So that's why I haven't gone to that next step,
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure that out, how I can incorporate the two together. So I don't know. We'll see.
I think
Maybe
you
I'll come
should.
on here and sing for a second or something.
There you go. There you go. So if somebody wanted to buy your books, how do they find them?
You can find them on Amazon. That's probably the easiest. So Hope Elevated is the story of my, overcoming 20 years of addiction, and Beyond Recovery is really that next step and discovering your purpose. So amazon.ca.com, all the Amazons out there, you can find it by just entering my name as well.
Okay. how do we get a signed copy?
Ooh, I'll just have to send one to you.
I would love
Me
a
too.
signed copy
That's
because
awesome.
I need a new book to read. I'm still trying to finish up the one from Mike Lindell. I don't know if you've read that one. He's the My Pillow guy. I don't know if you guys have My Pillows in Canada or nothing, but yeah, he does this My Pillows and very, very successful. But his book went from it's called From a Crack Addict to a CEO of a company, and this man went through some. This dude was crazy. I mean, he was literally crazy. I mean, he pulled himself out of some bad situations many, many times. But it's a phenomenal book. It's a really good story, and I got to get reading it. But we would love a copy of your books. That would be great. But how would somebody get a hold of you? I know they can probably find you on Facebook, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely. I hang out on Instagram as well, The Road Beyond Recovery. And probably the easiest place is just to head on over to my website. It's www.theroadforward.ca. That's
Okay.
the name of my company. And I've got all my social media links, and there's a little contact box that you can email me as well. And I'm always happy to chat with anybody.
Cool.
Nice. Very good.
Tamar, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with Lori and Brad and myself and be on our show and share your knowledge, your experience. And I'm sure this show is going to help lots of people. And I know that you are actually doing that. And I have to say, I get emotional on this part. Thank you for doing what you are doing, because you are helping so many people, and there are a lot of us out there now that say enough's enough. It's time to get the word out, time to spread it, time to get people to not look at those who are battling addiction. Doesn't matter what kind of addiction it is. There's nothing wrong with them. You know, they're going through a different life crisis like we all go through, but we're all here to help one another because they cannot do it alone. None of us can.
Yep,
So
exactly.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Tamar. Thank you so much. Brad, again, thank you, Resilience Talk Network. And I'm going to, no, we got all the sponsors, right? I hit all the sponsors. I'm just making sure I don't want to leave anybody out. So we're going to end the show with this. Addiction is giving up everything for one thing. Recovery is giving up one thing for everything.
And as I always like to say, there's always light after the darkness.
Amen. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.